Hi, you're watching Ready, Budget, Go. My name is Drew, and a warm welcome or welcome back to you. Today's video is part of the My Money Relaunch series, where I'm using this book of paint by sticker pages to help me save toward my big goals. I'm saving $2 per sticker, and while I'm putting them down, I'll tell you a little more about the strategies I used and still use to gain control over my money once I got out of debt. Ready? Let's go! This week we're focusing on estate planning, which is the last of the 6 elements of the Strive method. And the Strive method is, again, what I developed for managing my own personal finances after I became debt-free. To recap, Strive stands for saving and spending, taxes, retirement, insurance, investments, and estate planning. All of the different components of Strive touch each other, and we'll see that today. I hope that this has kind of become evident in the previous 5 episodes, especially, but I think it'll be even more so today. Now, after this week's episode, and for next week, I will do kind of an interlude where I recap what we covered for the first go round and talk about the second time around, because again, Strive is not a one and done, or it isn't for me, and I still use it. There is a different element that I focus on every month. This month is insurance for me because it's November, and it is open enrollment, or your employer may call it open season on health insurance. So it's not only health insurance that I look at, but it's the main focus. And that's why, well, it's one reason why I do insurance twice a year, because so much of my focus this month is on insurance that when I come back to it in April or June or May or whenever, that I'm able to focus on other things because the health insurance is already locked in for the year. So, insurance is not today's topic. Today's topic is estate planning. This is somewhat grisly and morbid. You could look at it that way, but it is essential. If you've dealt with loss, you know the importance of doing estate planning, regardless of whether your your loved one did that for you or not. Because estate planning is not a service that we do for ourselves. It is a service that we do for our loved ones, for our heirs, for our descendants, for anyone who stands to inherit what we leave behind when we depart this mortal coil. So, one of the most important things when it comes to estate planning, and I'm going to bring this back to insurance, but it's naming your beneficiaries. This mostly, well, I shouldn't say mostly, but beneficiaries, when people think about that, they think of insurance plans often, right? So naming a beneficiary on your life insurance, naming a beneficiary on your homeowner's insurance, naming a beneficiary on any insurance policy that you have that is not your health insurance, right? Because that's just for you. But anything else, if you are not the one who stands to be made whole if you experience a loss, it's going to be someone else. So, for example, let's say you have a fire insurance rider on your homeowner's insurance policy, or you have a separate fire insurance policy, whatever the case may be. You would be the primary beneficiary because generally, if your house burns down, you are the one who is going to have to rebuild it or buy another house or what have you. But unfortunate things happen, and sometimes a house burns down with the homeowner in it. This just happened to a famous singer earlier this year, Jill Sobule. She died in a house fire. And if you are the only person who is named as the beneficiary on that insurance policy, then the payout, I believe, goes through probate. I mean, it gets all kinds of gummed up and creates problems for the heirs. So, easiest just to name a contingent beneficiary that if you should happen to perish with, in a house fire, then that money is there. And again, it is absolutely grisly and morbid to think about. And I don't say this to upset anyone, but these are the things that can happen. I mean, that is why insurance exists. If we had certainty that we would not experience an event like that in our lives, if we had that 100% certainty, we wouldn't need insurance. But it does happen, and that's why the policies exist. So respect why you bought the policy, is I guess what I'm trying to say, and make sure that not only that the policy is in place, that it covers what you need, like we talked about last week, but also that you have named the proper beneficiaries. So that is one thing that I wanted to get out of the way first, just because it goes to what we talked about last week with insurance. I think if you say estate planning to most people, they think about a will. They think about who gets their stuff when they're gone. And a will is an important part of estate planning, but it's far from the only component. You should have one if you don't already. You can find a will kit online. A will does not have to be something fancy, full of very formal language drafted by an attorney. It does not. A will just needs to state what goes to whom, and it needs to be witnessed, and it needs to be notarized. Make sure before you execute a will that you understand what your state requires. I don't know if it varies by state, but just make sure that those are in place, because especially if you believe that your estate will be contested for any reason, meaning that someone who is not named as an heir in your will believe they are entitled and try to fight your will or break your will, then you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. Keep 2 copies of the will once it's fully executed, and fully executed means you've signed it in front of 2 witnesses and a notary, and keep 2 copies of that fully executed will in safe places that are not near each other. So if you have a safety deposit box, that is a great place for 1 copy. I like to keep a copy of mine in a go bag, meaning that it is a fireproof document bag that only holds important documents, right? Birth certificate, passport, a spare credit card, any important documents, including a copy of the will. That all goes in there. So if an emergency happens and I need to get out, I grab that and I go. So that's where I keep 1 copy, and then another copy is with a relative, so that if something happens to my copy, another copy exists. One of the things that you will need to do when you make a will is to name an executor. Now, I am currently dealing with an estate that I am not a party to, but I'm kind of watching this unfold, where there are 2 heirs that are named in the will, and they have also been named co-executors, and that has created a big mess. So consider those circumstances. There's probably, in fact, I'm sure, there are situations out there where something like that would not result in any fighting or ill feelings or anything like that. That's not happening in the case that I'm observing. So if you think there's a chance for that where the heirs will not get along, name a third-party executor who is disinterested. And by disinterested, I mean that they are not an heir named in the will, right? So they don't stand to gain anything. They are just discharging the will according to your wishes. If you can't find someone like that, you can find an attorney who will do that for you, and the fees for that will just come out of the estate. And it may be worth it to have peace of mind that when you are gone, there's not going to be any bickering, or you've done everything you can to prevent bickering, right? It may happen regardless. One other thing that you will want to put in place is a power of attorney. Well, actually, 2 power of attorney. So one is just a regular power of attorney, so that if you have a situation, and this isn't where you are deceased. This is you're still alive, but let's say you're injured and you're in the hospital, and you've broken a whole bunch of bones in your body, and you can't speak, and you still need to make sure that your bills get paid. You need to make sure that anything that can happen or anything that you need to happen will happen. And so that is what a power of attorney is for. This is someone who can sign checks for you. It's someone who can use your assets to pay your liabilities, right? So someone who can use the money in your checking account to pay the rent, to pay the mortgage, to pay your car payment, to keep the lights on at your place, your water bill, any of those things. That is important. And it should be someone that you trust, obviously, because power of attorney is power of attorney. I mean, they essentially are your representative while you are unable to do things for yourself. Power of attorney is also really helpful if you if you are still able to make your wishes known but have just physical limitations. So, for example, with things like voting, when you get your ballot in the mail, if you cannot sign your ballot, you can make a mark and have it witnessed. And if your witness is a power of attorney, that really helps if your ballot gets challenged. And those ballots get challenged all the time because it's just a mark on the page. And so witnesses are contacted frequently to make sure that the voter's intent is well and known. Now, missing an election is not the worst thing in the world. However, if you do have a strong sense of civic duty, it's just something to keep in mind. You also need a healthcare power of attorney. This is sometimes, it goes hand in hand with a living will, which is also called an advance directive. And so a living will says, this is what I want to happen if I'm severely injured. It's essentially, do you have a DNR, a do not resuscitate? Or do you want the hospital or wherever you are receiving treatment to make every possible effort to save your life, keep you on life support, of that nature? So that is your wishes. Healthcare power of attorney is someone you trust who can make decisions like that for you. If your advance directive or your living will is not enough, meaning if you are subject to a set of circumstances that isn't covered in your living will, a healthcare POA will give someone the ability to make those decisions for you. So again, someone you trust, the person you trust the most should be the one who gets that designation. You don't want to have multiple of these floating around because then, it can start a fight among the different designated people. So make sure it's one person that you trust. Have a backup if they're not available, but keep the order clear. And I should just reiterate again, I'm not an attorney. If you have questions about anything like this, you really should speak to someone who specializes in estate planning. You can talk to a certified financial planner about it. They know some of it, right? So they will not be able to give you legal advice unless they're also an attorney. But part of the certified financial planner program is estate planning. And so they will be able to talk to you about these kinds of documents, what you should put in place, how you go about doing them, things like that. But any legal questions, speak to a qualified attorney. Have the conversation about your end of life wishes. So it's one thing to write them down. It's another to tell the people in your life what you want. It's the conversation that we never want to have. We never want to make time for it. And then suddenly it's too late. So, that is something that I wish I had done more with my own mother. I knew some of her wishes, but I still had to do a lot of guesswork. And understand that when you leave that kind of decision making to someone, and they're going to do what, if they love you, they're going to do what they think you want, but they might guess wrong. And on top of that, they will also be left with a sense of doubt, more than likely, for most of their lives. Did I do the right thing? Is this what he or she would have wanted? Could I have done something different, better? The usual. So having the conversation eliminates that guilt and gives both of you the certainty that when the time comes, that what you want will be honored. I already talked about keeping, I'm just reading through my notes here. I talked about keeping a small fireproof bag or box. Waterproof as well is ideal. So you want to protect against both fire and flood, because you never know. Keep it within easy reach. And like if you have to evacuate, every time the fire alarm goes off in my building, I grab it and go. So passport, credit cards, or a credit card anyway. I keep one credit card in there that has a zero balance. I never charge, well, I charge on it once or twice a year just to keep it active. But other than that, I just have it there available, knowing that if it's an emergency, I have a credit card that I can use. Birth certificate, house deed, anything like that. There are checklists online that will tell you what to put into that kind of a box or bag. So that is, I think, enough for the first time through estate planning. It's difficult the first time. It gets easier the second time that you go through it with Strive, because you've already done most of the hard work. You've had most of the difficult conversations. So from then on, it's just making sure that everything is still up to date. If something happens to one of your beneficiaries, or if you need to change them, then you have the conversations again. But you've already had the conversation once, so it gets easier with practice. And it also gets easier with age. When I was in my early 20s, I didn't want to talk about estate planning. It's like, who wants to think about that? Who has time for that? But in middle age, things are a little bit different. I've experienced some loss, and I've also started thinking about what I want my legacy to be. So that is it for this week. Again, next week, there will be a little bit of an interlude to kind of wrap up the first 6 months of Strive, and I'll tell you a bit about where I got with it after I went through all of these different exercises that I've been talking about, and then we'll start over again with saving and spending, and it'll be different topics, right? So every time I go through it, there's something a little bit different. So thank you so much for listening, or for watching, or for both. If you enjoyed the video, leave it a thumbs up, drop me a comment down below, and until I see you again next week, take care.